Hi. Oh man. What a week. What a week. Barely getting going on it too. So, hello. Where can we start? Trying to think what matters at this point. Um, what matters to talk about? Working on tanks. I mean, you guys saw when I was like prepping for the auction with Saturday's video, which got abysmal viewership, and I kind of expected, but that's fine. um, I did also kind of like some tank maintenance at the same time. I do have some like more stuff I have to do, and of course we got the tanks we're building. The Anoxic, well, will become Anoxic tank right now is doing pretty good. About the only issue, quotation marks around that I'm running into is my carbonate hardness keeps reading like 0, which means my pH is just super low. So I need to buffer more KH into my water to make sure that I'm not like pH crashing that tank. And I think what's happening is just the safety Zorb has absorbed just so much stuff out of the water. Other than it's going to show some general hardness just because it is Montmorillonite clay that's going to add some hardness to the water, but it's been absorbing a lot of the other stuff that we've put in. So it's just a matter of getting that to balance out to where it stops reading KH 0, and then it'll be ready to chop down the outlet tubes. Remove one and chop down the other, and properly get it rolling toward potentially creating anoxic conditions. So there's that. That's been fun in all my tests because like everything else looks good except for the pH is like the lowest the test can read, and the KH is 0, which is not good, right? Because it means some level of potential pH crash that could be dangerous to the bacterial health in the aquarium and thus render the experiment from the very get-go not good. So got to get that figured out, right? And then once that's done, start progressing toward establishing bacteria and a bacterial colony. I picked up some Fritz Zyme 7 just to establish some of the bacteria in the tank, because it will do a really good job of getting into the safety Zorb and stuff like that. So that'll give us like a Kickstarter to go with our small amount of ammonium chloride to feed everything, and then should be good to go. Yeah, what else? Don't want to talk about the other stuff. I talked with Alex from Fishery a little bit, and Joel over the weekend. Joel Korvasoskin, my friend, and that was nice. Got to see a lot of cool people at my club auction. Talking to Alex was done like Sunday, Monday. I can't really remember. It's kind of all blurred together. But we talked about a few things. We both have a mutual want to see like some kind of aquarium related swap meet back in the Seattle area, because there used to be a bunch of them. There used to be, I think, like 3 a year plus the 2 big club auctions. And now there's none. There's just the 2 big club auctions. So we're talking about like, what do we think we could organize it, figure it out, and what would that take, and all this kind of stuff. And, what was successful ones in the past and all that kind of stuff. So we know some other folks in the area were interested, and we're just kind of like spitballing with each other, trying to figure out how to get something happening. I think he's probably more likely to organize stuff than I am, because I'll be very, very busy in the next month, 2 months, maybe longer. I'm not sure. So let's talk the auction, and then potentially we'll give you guys some other news. So went to the GSAS auction, right? And it was at the same. So we normally have our meetings at Seattle Pacific University, which is in kind of downtown Seattle, Fremont. For those who are local, you'll understand that area. Um, and it, like on weekdays, it could be a real bear to get to, but we've changed our meetings now, finally, after kind of going to war. We changed them to Saturdays, and our big events were typically on Saturdays. Usually our auctions are not at the same campus, but this time around, our club at least has been struggling to find good locations that fit their parameters. And they have some kind of strict parameters, which might be part of the problem. Like they really only want to spend like so much money, but every auction seems to be like more and more money. So I don't understand like how we can't just invest a little bit in a better location. What do I know, right? I don't run the club. So needless to say, like parking was not the greatest at this location, but the actual venue itself is relatively nice. And spacious because it's a big hall that is on the college campus. They had something like 1,000 lots at this auction. And there was a lot of stuff where we were like merging things together to speed the process up because they had only completed just the fish and plants. They still had a bunch of like equipment and stuff at almost 4 p.m. And we started at 10 a.m. So you got to think about that. 6 hours of auction, and we had only completed the fish, plants, and some amount of like, there was raffle drawings, and there were like some tanks that were there that got sold and all that kind of stuff. And equipment was being sprinkled in, but there was a big focus after a certain period of time to like, let's get through all the fish and plants and then get on to the remaining equipment stuff. Some person had like, I heard a story, I don't know if it's true, but apparently they were going through a divorce and had broke down their fish room as a part of said divorce and brought like everything that was in their fish room in a giant trailer and just was donating it all or whatever to the club. And so there were some really insane deals to be had if you had a vehicle large enough to take some of this stuff home. So as an example, I saw a 90-gallon Clearview acrylic go for $5. And it was in good shape. It was in really good shape. It wasn't like all scratched up or anything. It was in very nice shape. So a 90-gallon acrylic, $5. I saw a 75-gallon long, similar to my tank that I have downstairs, which is also acrylic, made by TrueView, $25. There were these two like 120-ish gallon acrylics that had like nice overflows and all this kind of crazy plumbing built into it, ready to go. They were like $20 and $30 each. So if you had like a big truck and or a large enough vehicle, you could have got highway robbery level deals on some tanks. I saw a guy, they had a 55-gallon acrylic. There's a lot of acrylics. This guy had a ton of acrylic tanks with the stand and a sump, a wet dry sump, and the like wood hood, those nice wood stands, right? And the light up in it. Now, granted, it was an old compact fluorescent light, so you would want to remove those things. That whole setup with the stand and everything went for $25. Because so many people in this area they don't have vehicles that can carry that stuff. Or they're in like apartments and things like that where they don't have the space for large tanks. So all these crazy large tanks were going for nothing. And if you had space, you could have just walked away with insane deals, right? But there's like a flip side to this. Okay, so there was and some of us oldies in the chat will remember. For those who know the Metaframe or metal frame tanks, right? There was one of the little 2.5 gallon picture tank. So it's a tall tank instead of our usual dimensions, and it's very thin and tall, and it's designed for photography. That tank went for $225. Think about that difference, right? And it needed to be resealed. It was said, like, you need to reseal this, but it even had the little light fixture on top that matched it, that would normally hold a little tube light. So think about that. 90-gallon acrylics, big 100-gallon acrylics, $30 or less. 2.5-gallon Metaframe tank, $225. That's how my club operates. It is wild out here, just because a lot of people live in smaller places. You know, it's very, very common out here to have smaller apartments, or you're renting a place that will not allow you to have a fish tank over like 10 gallons. So all of the like nanotanks are very popular out here. Very, very popular. Like there was a number of rimless tanks and things like that that were all our raffle items, and they had tons and tons of participation because they're very popular here. Whereas big pieces of equipment, no interest. Because very few people either have like big dedicated spaces or have a vehicle that can carry it. Because you got a lot of people that are driving something like a small compact car that's really efficient or really inexpensive. You know, you've got a lot of your Hondas and Priuses and things like that that they can't fit those big tanks, right? You just can't fit them. It's pretty wild. I didn't see Amazon pancakes. I didn't see any old like oceanic tanks. And then for the first, I don't know, like 3.5, 4 hours. I mean, it was quite a while. Plants and fish were going for very high prices. Like I saw bags of Java fern going for more than what it probably would have cost to buy them retail. Now, granted, in the bag of Java fern, you're probably getting much more than you would ever get in a pot of Java fern. So in the end, the deal is pretty good. But it's just like, you would see things that are like common plants that you would expect to be cheap. And it was like, okay, here's this like bag of Java fern that has a good sized portion of Java fern. You look at it, it's like, that's probably like 1 or 2 pots worth. And it was going for like $22, $23. It was like, yeah, that seems a little expensive. I mean, great for those of us who were selling, right? For those of us who were selling our plants, it was really awesome. Like I walked away. I didn't take very much home. I picked up some plants for the tank that I'm building with my wife, and I think like one plant for brother-in-law James, because the plant I really wanted several times went above the threshold of what I was willing to pay for it. They had 3 of these Nymphea peruensis portomaldonados, which it's a Nymphea I haven't grown yet, and I really like Nymphea plants. And brother-in-law James's tank has this awesome spot where he wants to put a Nymphea. He wants a lily of some form. And I was like, oh, we can get something we don't have yet. It'll be kind of fun and cool instead of like getting the same stuff we usually have. That plant kept going for like $35 plus. The first one that sold went for like $55. It went for a lot. I was really surprised at like how much some people were paying for some of the plants. Only way, I got a bag of 4-year-old Corydoras Weitzmani, 5 of them for $24. Wow, that's really good. So there were also some like really insane deals on fish. And I'll get to that in a sec, because Amazon pancakes are asking, were there any old aquarium books or old aquarium magazines? We have sometimes at our auctions in Pennsylvania, and I absolutely love the old collectibles of the hobby. There were a number of books that came through. Many of them were out of print. So like there was some from Dick Au, A-U, who's his Discus book that's out of print. And those were going for like, I think $40 and $50, which I've heard that like on eBay, they go for as much as a few $100s sometimes. Although when I looked after the auction, I was like, is that real? I saw a bunch of them up for sale. So, and they weren't going for that much. So take that with the grain of salt. But There were a few older books. There was a collection of the old Tropical Fish magazine that went for, I think it was like 10 issues, 12 issues, something like that. And it went for the equivalent of about $2.50 an issue. So not very expensive if you think about it. But we usually don't see really large amounts of old books unless it is something. We have the last time we saw that in one auction was after an older member had passed away, and we were helping their family sell off a lot of the stuff that they weren't going to be able to keep, because that was the main fish person in the family, and no one else was really that into fish comparatively to where they needed like an entire fish room and this like library of books and stuff like that. And what our club typically does when things like that happen is they'll bundle a couple of books from like the same author, or maybe it's like if there's a series of books that covers like, oh, this is South American, this is African, whatever, something like that. We'll bundle things together so you get these cooler collections, and it kind of helps incentivize people to get a little more active, because it'll usually have one or two books they're interested in and maybe one book that's not as appealing. Because like as an example, African cichlids are really not popular in the Seattle area because our water is anti-African cichlid. You have to do a lot of work to buffer it to get the right mineral content. So typically you don't see a lot of African cichlid keepers in the Seattle area, but there are some. So like an African cichlid book doesn't do as well as say like an angelfish book or a discus book or an Amazonian featured book. It's like interesting stuff like that. So here's some of the, like the things that I thought were the craziest deals outside of the aquariums, because the aquariums, I've gotten used to this. When people take big tanks to our club auctions, they go for nothing. And when you bring some like small, interesting, quirky tanks, they can go for surprising amounts of money. Like there was another 10-gallon metaframe tank, and it went for like $115. So the metaframes are very popular. People love those things, love refurbishing them and keeping them. Not my jam personally, but you know, everybody's got their thing, right? There were something like 10 bags of Melanitania Calitaiwa, which apparently Tawa is supposed to be pronounced Taiwa. I learned that recently from Gary Lang, that I was pronouncing it wrong, so correcting myself. But for like the most chase rainbow fish right now, bags of 6 of them going for like $30 to $35. There was like 10 of them. So you could have had an instant colony of Melanitania Calitaiwas for the price of only like 2 or 3 fish. Insane to me. And this is from a local breeder who is very, very good, really knows what he's doing. He donated a lot of spare fish to the club to help the club because he just had too many fish. He's too good at breeding, apparently. So he donated a number of these bags. And there was, I cannot tell you, just every time I saw them go, I was just like, oh my Lord, these are going for so cheap. So cheap. So cheap. And like you'd see lots of plants and stuff go for a lot until you got to the very tail end of the auction. And then you were seeing like really good deals. So an example, I got like a relatively good chunk of Nana Petite, Anubias, about yay size rhizome for like $6. And I got this like big bag full of just regular crypt Wendetii greens for $9. And it's easily like 4 pots worth of crypts. So these are things that are going to go into like tanks. I got a Anubias coin and a couple other small Anubiases to be like accent pieces in my wife's tank. And they were all at relatively cheap prices in the grand scheme of things. They were basically all like half or less what they probably should have cost me, which is really, really nice, right? It's a really good thing to get those. But that's definitely not the best buy. My best buy was one of these. This is a Kessil A360X. Right? Now hold on. Just so that we can do this. For those who are really curious and want to know, I'll give you the Amazon link. The retail price on this light, if for some reason you ever make a purchase off the link I just put in chat, I do get a commission because I'm an Amazon affiliate. Please, FTC, do not sue me. Thank you. Okay. I want to play this game. What did I pay for it? This is a $450 light retail. I want to be very clear. The box was open, but from everything that both Joel and I could tell, this light looks like it has never been used. It didn't even have the hangers installed in it. It looks like somebody had opened the box, looked at it, and went, oh, that's not what I want. This is a tuna sun, right? So it's the freshwater light. Very nice light. $1. I wish it was $1. All right. Drum roll, please. I paid $74 for this thing. 74 American pesos. Just highway robbery for the light. Now, context. My wife, I gave her a couple options because we're going to put a very nice light on the tank that she's putting together. And I showed her like the Kessil shimmer, right? And she was like, ooh, I really like that. So that's why I went for that. Kind of bonkers, right? To get something that cheap. And it's so like I brought it home and I installed the hangers and it's already like up on the tank that it's going to be on. But at that price, now here's the thing, right? Because of the plants I sold versus how little I bought, effectively speaking, I still walked away with my club owing me money. I sold something like $230 worth of plants after the club takes its cut, which the club takes 30% at our auctions currently. So, technically I sold slightly more than that, but whatever, I didn't care about that part, right? And I only spent, with having spent $74 on a light, I only spent like $112. If I remember that. It was $112, $113. It was less than $115. So the club owes me money, and I got a really sweet light. Leo 209, I'll take a 400-gallon, please. So I have a Pogo in that 135, still getting over 40 ppm nitrate weekly. Want to get it in the 20s. Any advice? Try getting... Are you using a hang-on back filter anywhere on that tank? Because what I would do, honestly, is like get a pothos and put it in a hang-on back. Even if the hang-on back's only job is just to run water and hold the pothos in place, because pothos are like monsters for eating nitrates. However, just keep in mind that it might consume so much nitrate in combination with your Pogo that it hurts other plants. Just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. That tank looks good. It's on the tank in the corner, right? Oh, okay. Can you imagine putting like that insane a light on a small tank over here in my little like area? It'd be wild. I'm not that fancy, but yeah. So yeah, pretty sweet to get that kind of insano deal. So that'll be on that tank. You guys will see that relatively soon. We're working on doing some of the hardscape work. I have a few more rocks I have to get washed. And yeah. So yeah, that was my auction experience. I left at like 3:45, 4 o'clock. Oh, keep in mind, it can dial the intensity down and stuff, right? So you don't have to have it at massive intensity, but it's a pretty configurable light. And I left, and there were still probably several hours of just like fish room stuff from that one guy that brought a ton of things that had to get sold. What item stunned me with the price being high. That that Metaframe photography tank, I didn't think it was going to go for more than like $100. And I was sitting, Joel and I were sitting side by side, and he goes, "Watch, this thing will go for 200 or more." And I went, "No way, dude! It's 2.5 gallons." He goes, "Those photography tanks, they're super rare now. So there's going to be like one or two people that are going to really want it bad, and they're going to go crazy for it, and they'll spend way too much money." And one was like, "I don't think it's going to go for more than like 75 to $100." And I was absolutely wrong. The only other thing past that, there was, I'm trying to remember, there was a stem plant. There was a rarer stem plant that went for a really high, what I thought was really high given the portion size. It was one of the Rotalas, not orange juice or blood red. Man, trying to remember. I would go. Let me see if see if for some reason they're still on here. Yeah, no, they put all the stuff away. Sometimes like our auctions will take a little while before they wrap them all the way, and you can still look at the whole list of items that were sold, but they've closed it by now. It was one of the like red, almost purple Rotalas, but not like Florida blood red or orange juice, any of the more common ones. It was a relatively rare one. And that thing went for like, I think it was like 5 or 6 stems in the bag. Very healthy stems, don't get me wrong, but it went for like $60. And for me, it was like, it's a little expensive for a Rotala. Rotalas, other than their high demand, right? Rotalas are very aggressive growers. They grow fast, so they shouldn't, to me, they shouldn't be super expensive unless it like just got into the hobby. There was also these like really cool, very small ferns. It's like Cripoides or something like that. But they're like, they look like micro Java ferns. They're super tiny. And they were going, and they like literally the piece of the fern in the bags were like this big. And I know the grower, who's a relatively good friend of mine inside the club, and those are going for like $35 a piece. Which, if you think about like how big the plant is, it was just like, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, man. But they're very rare plants. They've only been in the hobby for like 5 years, 4 years, not very long. So, relatively new. Basically, no one else in the Seattle area has them. A lot of like the super plant nerds, or at least people who are like really aggressively growing plants right now, aka not me, because I've kind of chilled out some, like go bonkers for that kind of stuff. So there's always like 4 or 5 people in the room that are like, I'll pay a dumb amount of money for a plant no one else has. But you also had like, you would get bags that looked like they stuffed a basketball worth of Java fern needle leaf into them, and they were going for like $20. So you could have all the needle leaf you'd ever need for a fairly large tank for like $20, right? And there are a lot of places where getting needle leaf Java fern is very hard to do. At our auction, like everybody brought some, because I brought 3 bags, and I think 4 or 5 other sellers brought multiple bags of needle leaf Java ferns. There was just a ton of it floating around the auction in the grand scheme of things. And a couple other like uncommon but common enough to where they're not like crazy rare stuff was also floating around, like Java fern tridents and stuff like that is not impossible to find, but just isn't like the most common plant you find at like every fish store. You would get good deals on a lot of that stuff. Especially if you waited longer and longer as people started to kind of peter out, or like, bags of miscellaneous guppies would go for like $4 or $5, like, guppy species X go for like $3, $4, something like that. Not be super expensive. But yeah, it is very interesting, seeing all that. Yeah, Ken, I'm not really sure which species of Rotala it is. I'd have to go like hunting a bunch to figure it out. But it was a different, it's like a more purpley red, and it's kind of new-ish doing this, but it's not as common as like the orange juice or the blood red, which are some of the more common ones now that used to be kind of rare. But it is one of like the hyper demandy ones that you usually have to do some kind of nutrient starvation to get optimal color and all that kind of stuff. And it went for a good amount. There's also some house plants that sold that went for like really good amounts of money, but not crazy expensive. So like as an example, this is one of the ones that stunned Joel and I as we were sitting there, and Dean. We all kind of looked at each other like, what? There was a big chunk of pothos. It was like 3 feet long, right? That pothos went for $25. You can get a new pot of pothos at a Home Depot for like $5. And it'll grow that long in no time. So that was one of the things that like confused all of us, where we're just like, that don't seem right. But you got people who don't like regularly go and buy houseplants that like pothos, or maybe they want to have it in their fish room because they saw it somewhere else. They're just like, they don't care. They just want to get it. And it's a big, healthy piece. So they're getting a lot of it. Yeah. A bunch of people say, can for the fish room. Good to see you, buddy. Dixon Designs. Howdy. Fish keeping Jamaica. Good to see you again, buddy. Master Photographer. It's been a while since we've seen you, bud. I know my time is not normal for you, so good to see you. Good to see you. No, Linda, that's the thing about the pothos. It was regular pothos. It was not a special varietal at all. I would understand if it was like one of the variegated varieties or something like that, where you get the whites or something special about it. But no, it was just like regular pothos. Just a massive piece of it. There's also this person who brought in their Amazon sword called Swordzilla. And it was the best. It was in all capital letters, like with a space between each letter, so it took up a bunch of room. But this, I joke you not, this Amazon sword had this like about this big a root ball, and was about yay tall. So about like, I don't know, 18 to 20 inches worth of height on this sword. Just absolutely massive. Looked like it had 40 leaves or so. It's like just bonkers size sword. And that went for quite a lot. But this is the kind of sword you'd plant it in like 1/3 of your 125-gallon aquarium, and it will take up the whole thing. Right? It was a massive sword plant. Absolutely massive. It's like so bonkers. Michael Alexis, good to see you, buddy. Former GSAS member. Good to see you, buddy. Let's maybe some people want to support the swap people. Yeah, I mean that could be the case too, right? I think a lot of it is just like there is that part where if multiple people bid on something, there's something in our brains that just like clicks, and we're like, no, I want to win, you know. And I think that's part of what happened to happen there, and that's fine, right? People are getting what they want. That's all that matters. Just for me, I was kind of like, can't you just go to Home Depot and buy pothos dirt cheap? Leo 209. Does having it in a hob make a bigger difference than having it hang in the tank? Yes, because it's rotating more water through. So you're moving more water, which means you're inherently going to cycle more nitrates toward the plant than if it just sits there naturally, because it's more reliant on the flow of the water inside the tank rather than the powered flow through the filter. The filter is the one moving all the water, right? Just think about it that way. You're like forcing water flow to the pothos if you have its roots there, versus making it reliant on whatever flow happens to be in the tank and letting its roots grow. Also, it can be more contained there. So from a certain perspective, it might be better than having it hang in the tank. There was a question earlier about philodendron being safe for the aquarium, right? And off the top of my head, I think so. I gotta remember, I am not a big like terrestrial plant person, so I don't necessarily always know the answer to what that is. Oh yeah. That's yeah, Philodendrons, you absolutely can use in an aquarium. Just keep in mind that you don't submerge them. All you're doing is you're putting the roots in the water and you're letting the rest of the plant exist outside the water. So if like you've watched any of, say, like Aquarium Domain's channel, right? He's recently built his big 4,500 gallon, and he has a bunch of baskets in the back holding like monsteras and various, but I think he's got some peace lilies and other plants like that. So the plants are growing out of the water, but the roots are held in the water so that they can feed off of all the nitrates and stuff that are going to be produced inside the aquarium. But they're still exposed to atmospheric air for like CO2 and all those other things. Those plants, most of your terrestrial plants do not want to be submerged for a long period of time. Even like some plants that like Petco's and PetSmarts will say are aquatic, like Lucky Bamboo, absolutely not aquatic. They do not want to be submerged the entire time. They don't mind if their roots are in the water and feed out of the water, but the whole plant, especially like the stalk, no, they'll die over time. So just keep that in mind. And there's lots of easy ways to set it up that way, so it's easy. Robert Johnson, do you know if if bloodworms have natural carotenoids like krill does? So I don't think bloodworms have a ton, if they have any at all. I don't. Usually when we're trying to build color enhancing food, which almost always is red enhancement, because we're really just saying whenever you see color enhancing food, it usually means there's additional carotenoids in the food. You usually don't see bloodworms as like a primary way to get that. Usually you're focused on things like krill and some of those kind of sources. So a lot of your, crustacean invertebrate type sources that naturally have a lot of that. But I imagine like they have to have some amount in order to keep their color the way they do. I don't know. Worms are so much different than like in the way that their biology functions compared to say like an invertebrate. So they might not need carotenoids at all to have that color. I've never looked that deep because the color enhancement carotenoids are usually something that I don't focus on a lot because most rainbows just don't need them, right? They're great food sources, but they just don't need the carotenoids in order to get that kind of color. So usually it just doesn't matter. Paul Soltero, philodendron and pothos are the two sides of the same coin. Cool. Like I said, not a terrestrial plant guy. I know like 4. And other than like the couple that are in my garden, I don't know many. How about a bi-coastal auction between select clubs? Technically a logistics nightmare for live animals, but a valid idea. Well, you do have... I think the closest you're going to get to that are either the Quad City swap or the big Greater Chicago Cichlid Association swap, the GCCA swap, because those have enough central location that they bring just huge volumes of people. But because they're bringing such a huge volume of people and there's so much vendor stuff coming on, it is more efficient to run those as swaps than to run them as auctions. Because if you run as an auction, it'll take forever, right? And I think some of them do like some small silent auctions, but just when you try to scale out and get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, auctions become really unwieldy and they take forever. So that's usually where like a singular club can do an auction, or a couple of small clubs can get together and do one like bigger auction that's closer to like a large club doing an auction. But when you start getting like multiple big clubs together, it becomes very, very hard to run an auction efficiently, especially when you have to deal with like, how much is each club getting a cut of it? How are you determining all these things, right? Because now you need like some level of software to do all this nonsense, and makes it a little tough. That's where swaps tend to be better, because it's pretty easy to just go, okay, a table costs this much. We know the split. We sell this many tables, and then this club gets this percent, this club gets that percent, etc., etc. It's a lot easier. Dude, Cora works. Thank you, buddy. Really appreciate gifting the 5 members. So congratulations to Linda.
S.C. Catahulis, Rocky and Miles, Kaylee Caulfield, and David Sandoval. You're members now. Lets you have access to a couple different things. One, if you're really fast about it and you've never done it, you can join the members Discord. Or at least I think so. It might only gift at like the auto sync level, but still, you have access to all the emotes, which are fun. I have personal favorites, like this one. Bam. Oh, man. But yeah, I might be doing changes to all my membership stuff and just make it like one. Make it easy and peasy. Just because having it split feels weird. I think if I just do one and make it simple, it's a little easier for everybody. I don't know. I'll figure it out. It's some of the stuff I've been thinking about, trying to, when I've been doing a bunch of the polls, I've got a few more polls I want to do that have come into my head now, but yeah. Yeah, well, I said it was a logistics nightmare. Yeah, right. That's the big problem. But I think also just like when you get to the big scale, it's just easier to have like an army of tables and people just walk around and find stuff they want to buy, and there's always going to be good deals. Just makes it a heck of a lot easier. EL. So recently saw that freshwater snails are one of the most dangerous creatures and kill a large amount of humans. Do you know any aquarium snails ever being the reason for death? I can't think of any. I mean, I imagine there's some risk when it comes to some kind of disease transfer. Probably mostly things like getting the akin would be like the easiest thing to think of that you can potentially catch out of your aquarium that's really dangerous as a human is mycobacterium. So like fish TB, right? Because it can be really brutal on your body if you do catch it. But the likelihood of it transferring from the aquarium to you is really, really low. Even if you have open wounds. But if you have open wounds, you really just should not work in your fish tank or like wear some kind of protective cover. But yeah. Apply the punters with booze and the auctions fly by. See the bitches at ACA. If you don't know, there's a group of ladies at the ACA who do this wonderful charity auction. They call themselves the bitches or the bitch auction. It's hilarious. They're so fun to be around. The two gals that run it, Carolyn and Pam. Jeez, I don't know why my brain was like, just don't remember the one who speaks the most. Carolyn doesn't speak as often. Pam does. They're such wonderful ladies to sit down and talk with. Carolyn is an absolute hoot. I love that gal. I've got to sit and talk with her a couple times, and she's just she makes me giggle like a small child. It's great. Especially if you have also Chris Biggs at a table with you. That can be very difficult to like not laugh yourself to pain levels. Because those two are just so funny to sit and babble with. I hate how they don't specify the specific type of African freshwater snail that kills people. Yeah, okay, so it's a specific African snail? It's interesting. Is it, I mean, I assume it has to be some kind of poisonous. Ken, no, it was not Rotala ramiosaur. It's a varietal of inclinata. I know that part. So it's the longer, thinner leaves, which ramiosaur is not, right? And where the more dense foliage occurs. I cannot remember for the life of me right now the species. I'd have to go hunt it down, but yeah. Josiah, I've been following your Fluval 3.0 video with my new tank. If you had two on a 90 gallon, do you ever stop before 100%? How would you know to stop increasing? Sure. I talk about in some of those videos, especially the ultimate guides, about starting at a lower amount and slowly ramping up and kind of like monitoring your tank to see how it handles it. Where I would stop is if I start seeing excessive amounts of green dust algae, typically. Sometimes you can get a hair algae outbreak or something else, but usually you aren't getting a hair algae or blackbeard algae outbreak purely because of light. Light just helps. But dust algae are the ones that are most common because of excessive amounts of light. So if you're seeing lots of dust algae, whether they're green or on some plants where you're getting lots of that like black dust algae covering the tops of your plants, that to me is a sign where if you're starting to see an increased level of that type of algae, that's a sign that we have a little too much light and we need to dial it back some, especially if we're using 2 lights to really light the whole thing up really, really well. Coralworks, look up rat lungworm and its relationship with snails, parasite vectors. Okay, so basically, this is kind of like some other pathogens where it is reliant in its life cycle of some other species carrying it around and transmitting it or transferring it toward the intended host. Because that's scary stuff. It'd be interesting. I'll have to look at it. Just gonna go over here real fast and type it in so that I don't forget. Because I might forget. Breezy, can you talk about green beard algae? I notice it comes on after trimming, and I dialed in my light. Or you dialed your light way back. Green beard algae. I mean, sounds more like what you're actually getting is Claudophora algae. Hold on. So I'm going to give you the actual spelling because it's not the easiest to spell if you're just trying to sound it out and you're bad at spelling, like me. Claudophora. So this is similar to what makes Marimo mossballs is Claudophora algae. And that's like, I guess you would call that greenbeard algae, but if you want to specify, it's probably Claudophora. And in this case, Claudophora is a lot tougher and tends to be smellier than standard hair algae, as Only Way points out. It's not as susceptible to using a liquid carbon product like blackbeard algae is and staghorn algae is. What it is really susceptible to is hydrogen peroxide. So if you are really dealing with a tough problem and it has grown on something really specific that you can move up to the surface, or you can drain your water down to a certain point and you will not like completely drain your tank, but then it becomes at the surface. What I would do is go get a small squirt bottle, right? Just your atypical misting style bottle that you would use to mist out water or something like that. And make sure you mark it so that you know that you're putting hydrogen peroxide in it. Just use standard 3% solution that you buy at a grocery store, drugstore, whatever for dirt cheap. Fill that in there and spray a little. The nice thing about this is if you do it well and you do it carefully, you'll only take a little time. You can't just like blitz your whole tank. But as soon as hydrogen peroxide hits water, it immediately starts to break down and split into just hydrogen and oxygen and become safe. But for a short period of time, right, it's a very strong oxidizer. It's going to hit that algae and oxidize it and kill it. Not the easiest path, but it's going to be kind of safe. And usually your fish won't, if you're like bringing your hands down and you're kind of holding the plant up, they're going to avoid your hand and you can spray pretty safely. Give it a couple squirts so it mists over it really nicely. And then remove away and you should be okay. Can I dose the whole tank with hydrogen peroxide? Yes, you can. Okay. Here's how we do this. I'm going to give you an article. I'm going to give you everything you need to know. This is an article from 2013. That'll tell you how long this trick has been around. This is called the 1-2 punch method. Here's what I'm going to stress to you. This is typically used for a couple different types of algae and only when you have really bad infestations, like you're describing. The most important thing to note, follow this absolutely perfectly. And if you need to dose slightly less than what the article suggests, always do less, not more. Hydrogen peroxide has a potential to be very, very dangerous. But because it breaks down so quickly, very complex organisms, like our fish, are less likely to be harmed by it than simple organisms, like algae. If possible, try to remove your livestock from the tank and put them in a safe place when you're doing this treatment. That would be my
Personal suggestion. Even like a bucket temporarily, because it's going to break down relatively fast. Also, Mark Shrimp Tanks, as Nabokov fan is saying, has a really great video. Let me see if I can hunt that bad boy down. Do you remember the specific name of the video? Oh, wait a minute. Might have found it. Got it. There's another one. Bam. Just because I love Mark, we're going to grab this right here. I love his channel. Boom. There's a video from Mark Shrimp Tanks about how to dose hydrogen peroxide in your aquarium. Use both of these. Understand both. Research is your friend before you start trying it. But this is a solution to high levels of infestation of algae. Just keep in mind that you're also going to kill a lot of algae off, so you're probably going to get a spike in your ammonia. So be prepared to do water changes and things like that to handle it all. Yeah. And there you go. And Mark's version is entire tank shrimp safe. And usually fish are more durable than shrimp. Just keep that in mind. Cool. Hope that helps. What else we got here? I think we've jammed through all the questions. We're right toward time. I definitely need some hydration. Okay, there was one. I'll leave this toward the end. I mentioned last week, 2 weeks ago, that there might be a potential change in my stream schedule, and I think that is more likely now. So let me explain why. I'm currently looking for a new job. Because of some changes at my company that I work for, I'm not happy with the direction. And I'm not, how to put this? I am not confident in the original reason why I joined the company, which was the potential for, in a period of time based on the product we were working on then, to have some growth and for my QA team to be more than just me and me to kind of build my own dream team. Thankfully, I have some connections in a few places that will put me into positions that are more of what I want to do, hopefully. But I still have to go through like interviews and stuff like that. So with that being said, depending on how my work situation changes, I will then probably change my streaming schedule based on what my new work schedule becomes. Now, granted, my goal is to work as remote as possible, but most of the roles I'm looking at require at least some level of hybrid, where they're typically 2 to 3 days on site, and then it's just a matter of understanding what those particular companies find as the 3 whatever days they want on site to be. And if it lines up with Tuesday and then I'm working some schedule to where like it would be very tough for me to get home in time and make sure I could get the stream up and running, then I'll be moving the stream. So yeah, just a heads up. You guys will have plenty of heads up. As soon as I know, I'll be letting folks know, and it'll be one of those things where like there might be a short period of time where I don't stream as I'm trying to get used to a new schedule if I do find a new job relatively quickly. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, just a heads up. I'm making some changes. It could be Thursdays, could be Fridays. I could go to streaming on the weekends instead. I'm not really sure. I'm trying to figure that all out. But yeah. I'll answer these couple of questions real fast. Caitlin, my one surprise Pracox fry has turned into 50 plus. Yes! Yes! Eggs are surviving on the wood, no plants in the tank without getting eaten, and adults aren't eating the fry. Wow. Okay, so you have what typically in rainbow fish time is very rare occurrence, which is to say
very rarely do you find adults that leave their fry alone with rainbow fish. They're usually too dumb to realize otherwise. I have seen this happen with Chilatherina upper tor with my friend Ryan, Hoon Aquatics. I've seen him have that kind of success. So the fact that you're having that success is fantastic. Where you're going to run into problems, I think, is as multiple generations start to grow up, some of those juveniles might not be as chill and they might feed on the freshly hatched fry. So just keep in mind, you might need to move some fish out over time. But the fact that the current adults are leaving the fry alone is amazing and awesome. Stephen P. My Aponogeton robinsoni is flowering. Oh, yeah, dude. Man, you're going to make me sad. Screw you, Stephen P. Don't make me sad, ass. No, the fact that you have something that to me is kind of a legacy of Mr. Singh, I like. So if you do get it to propagate, spread it, man. Let's let that be part of Myrdul's legacy to the fish fam. Because that plant is incredibly rare in the United States. Very few people have it, and it's really cool. The fact you've got it flowering has to feel super good. Send me a picture. Please, please, please. You know how to get a hold of me. Send me a picture. Johnny Best, is a 20 long suitable for a pair of Kalitawa? Yes. In the short term, yes. They'll want a little more swim space if you ever go more than 2, but if it's just a pair, they'll be fine. I appreciate all of you being really cool about like if I have to change my live stream, and there is a small potential that I can't live stream. I think that's really unlikely because I would just find time on the weekend. But yeah, just I'll figure it out if as things happen. For right now, Tuesdays are perfectly fine. It doesn't matter. But I just want to let people know some of my reasons for talking about it are becoming more are solidified. So yeah. I'd watch you over anyone. Thanks. Thanks, Joe. Kingfisher's Catch. Love you, buddy. You've been around for so long, man. I hope one day I get to travel to one of the conventions up in Canada just so that we can hang out in person. I really do. I really, really do. Nabokov fan, what do you do in the situation of a major problem tank? Meaning you feel like you know what the disease is, or at least the method of treatment, but the fish are too far gone to survive. Okay. So this is usually tough. You have kind of 2 options. Do you feel that they are suffering? As an example, I had an angelfish recently. I talked about it in the video. One of my Leopoldis had a severe swim bladder issue. And I had consulted Dean because he's just bred angels for so long. And like I sent him video before it got even worse. And he was like, anytime I've had an angelfish get to this point, it's a swim bladder issue and they never recover. But here's what you can do to try. So I did a couple rounds of medication. I added some salt. I adjusted some temperatures. I did basically everything that I did a massive filter clean out, water change, vacuumed a lot of the excess mulm out of my substrate to try and like, just in case for some reason it was producing too much of whatever. I mean, I went really overboard, but not like full on crazy sterilization. Couple rounds of meds. He just progressively got worse, and it got to a point of where I knew he was suffering. So I removed him from the tank, put him into a small container, and started slowly titrating in clove oil. Clove oil basically puts fish into a comatose state. It's the most humane way. There's a couple other versions, but I think clove oil is the simplest and most humane way because it puts them into a comatose state where they stop breathing. And then from there, usually what I would suggest is you put them in like a Ziploc bag or something and put them in the freezer and freeze them overnight completely. That way you know you have absolutely humanely euthanized them. If you know that an entire tank is at that point, you can't recover it and they're suffering. So like as an example, it's kind of hard to tell if Mycobacterium is causing massive suffering in rainbow fish. So very often when I see it, I try to just let my fish live out their lives. And I know that that tank is like persona non grata, which is happening in my retirement tank, right? Nothing new can go in there. It's just, I let them live out their lives. Nothing new goes in. As they pass, that's it. I take care of it. But if you know that they're suffering, There is a way to dose clove oil to the entire tank, and you want to do it's a process. You don't want to just dump the whole amount in one shot. It basically slowly puts them unconscious in a very humane way, and then from there, you get it to a certain dose, you make sure they've been in it long enough, then you remove them from the tank and freeze them. And that's like the most humane way to euthanize the fish. Is there somewhere I can donate to these youth in Asia? The ancient joke. Oh man, we've been making that joke since I was like 13. I'm old. But yeah, I would say if you really had a problem tank and you felt that your fish were suffering, it sucks to say this, but that's the path I would take. Because it's just the most humane way to stop their suffering. Now, if you don't think they're suffering, but you know they're not going to recover, you can just let them live out their lives and know that like nothing else goes in this tank. And once everything else is done, I'm nuking the thing from orbit, right? You're cleaning everything out, everything gets thrown away, and you're going to bleach the tank to make sure that you kill off everything. Those are like kind of the approaches that I would look at. Hope that helps. Chance, clove oil method is quite humane if it goes down that route. Speaking from experience, unfortunately. Yeah, Chance, I mean, you and me both, buddy, fairly recently. Johnny Best, by the way, thank you for becoming a member of Autosynclus. Really appreciate you. And finally, Neo Veritas, moved my Danios to the pond. Now my Praecox stay in a corner, moved some Tetras over there. Whole week passed, they're still shy. Danio maniac magic is missing. Yeah, sometimes like it just could be that when they see all these fish suddenly leave, they think a predator has occurred. And that's going to put them on high alert for a while, but eventually they'll calm down. It's kind of like when you move fish to a fresh tank, they're going to be in a little bit of like panic, protect ourselves mode for a little while until they realize like, hey, it's okay. The human that came in is actually just feeding us and it's okay, right? Sometimes it can take a little time, like several weeks for them to chill back out. Rainbows especially will do that. That's how I've unfortunately had to put a few of my goldfish down in the end when they got swim bladder issues and couldn't right themselves. Zenny, yeah, sorry. But yeah, anyway, gang, I want to thank you so much for staying with me tonight. Yeah, 87 watching, only 6 likes. Yeah, throw a couple likes, huh? Try to do that YouTube thing. But as always, my friends, thank you so much for watching and stay awesome.